Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Jimmy Ellis. I'm the Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Education and want to welcome you to this webinar, Navigating Academics. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to give my co-panelists a chance to introduce themselves. So, Gihan, you want to start us off?
I think I would have figured this out yet already. Hi, I'm Gihan Fernando. I am the Executive Director of the AU Career Center, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Great, Marianne.
Next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marianne Norman. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Advising in our School of International Service. It's great to be here with you all.
Hi, folks. My name is Kyle Whitaker. I work in our Office of First Year Advising. I'm also an instructor with our American University Experience course. Thanks for being here.
Great. Yeah, and again, thank you all for being here. Good news for y'all is that this webinar is going to be recorded so you can review the things we talk about later. If we talk about things that'll be useful for us to be able to send to you resources that are related to it, we'll be sure to do that as well. Ahead of today, we received a lot of questions from the group, and we've tried to incorporate that into our presentation. So you'll hear some of our responses to your questions during the presentation itself. But please feel free to put questions into our chat. We have colleagues behind the scenes that are going to gather those for us, and at the end, be able to bring those to our attention. We can address as many of those as we can. So let's go and jump right in. You know, as we set the stage for this presentation, my panelists and the co-panelists and I were just eager to have this conversation. Why? Because it was a testament to just a routine, normal thing that we like to do. You know, get in touch with parents and families and talk about what students are experiencing, what they're going to look forward to, and the road to come. And so, in the context of, you know, so much being different and so much changing, there are some parts of this work that are familiar, and we're grateful that you're here to learn about this process. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We'll spend some time with Kyle, and he'll talk to us about the first year at AU and what your students are experiencing, and also describe a little bit of the work that he does and intersections of his department with our students. We'll move on to Marianne, and she'll describe some of that transition into the second year and beyond, and some of the opportunities to look forward there. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the academic support resources we have to offer. Gihan will be throughout our presentation talking about the career intersections. And at the end, we want to get the conversation started with y'all, talking about some of the ways that we think that you can continue to be there for your students as they navigate the transitions into and through the university. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go to you, Kyle, for this first part.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jimmy. Hi, like I said just a few minutes ago, my name is Kyle. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work as a first year advisor here at AU, and like I said, I teach the American University Experience course. You might have heard your students refer to it as AUX. I'm going to spend some time today talking with you a bit more about students' first year at AU and how our first year advising team supports your student in their transition to college, especially during these really unusual semesters of online and distance learning. So for those unfamiliar with how the advising model works here at AU, just a quick recap, right? Your student was matched with a first year advisor in May of this year who worked to get them registered for their fall 2020 courses that they're currently in. In most cases, this person has continued on as their advisor, and they will work with your student throughout their first year at AU. This advisor also instructs your student's section of Core 100 or the AU Experience 1 course, which all students take in their first semester. So this provides us a weekly opportunity to connect with your student and for your student to be in touch with us as their advisor, which means we really get to know them and get a sense of how they're doing. After students complete their second semester, they'll begin working with an academic advisor for their specific major or department who will assist them with some of the long-term planning and completing their degree. While many students explore an intended major or two in their first year, they won't officially declare a major or minor until they move on from first year advising in their sophomore year. And my colleague Marianne will speak more to this process in just a bit. So our job in first year advising is simply this: provide a consistent and reliable point of contact for students and help them adjust to their new role as a full-time college student. And Jimmy, if you want to click to that next slide, that'd be great. We are here to connect them with resources for academic support, wellness resources, wellness needs, co-curricular involvement, campus involvement, financial aid, and so much more. We provide some direct outreach and connection on behalf of students, but our role honestly is really to help them develop the skills and autonomy to advocate for themselves. That's why in this image you see kind of us along the side working with your student, but really encouraging them to do a lot of that direct communication and connection with campus resources. If we've done our jobs well, they'll get to the end of their first year feeling really confident in their knowledge of AU and how to navigate it successfully. So as you all know, this has been an unusual semester and it should probably shape up to be an unusual year, but much of how we work with our students hasn't really changed. So our approach is fundamentally the same. And while we aren't seeing your student face to face, we're still here as a point of contact and connection for them. One thing that is a bit different though, and I wanted to touch on briefly, is our AUX1 curriculum. Like I mentioned, all students are taking this course this fall. And we've worked really hard to adjust this course to better support students in this online environment. One change I'm really proud of is that over half of our instructors this semester are piloting a mindfulness curriculum, which pairs our course content with 10 to 15-minute mindfulness practices each week. Students have loved the opportunity to learn about mindfulness and practice it in this virtual environment. And honestly, so have we. Our instructors and advisors have really, really loved having some time to just connect with ourselves and how we're feeling and help ground ourselves in the midst of this crazy time. We've also reworked our approach for campus resources. So in the past, we might have asked students to just look up resources or maybe take a quiz on them. This semester, we've asked students to create their own virtual campus tour of AU's resources, particularly those that have moved online during this current environment. So they worked in small groups this semester to explore the many ways these support services have been moved online, everything from the counseling center to one-on-one academic support. And then they shared those presentations with their classmates. So a really collaborative way for them to kind of teach each other about the resources that exist. We've also built in several opportunities throughout the semester for students to reflect on their experience. We know that critical self-reflection is an evidence-based approach that really helps them reflect on how they're doing, make sense of their experience, and develop tools to cope with future challenges. So we've really tried to build that in throughout the semester. And lastly, just this week, many of our advisors and instructors are creating space in the classroom to talk about and process the election, right? Our curriculum is really flexible, and that's something I'm proud of because we know that especially right now, students need opportunity to connect with each other and build community. And sometimes that's really academic and sometimes that's really personal, and we try to create space for all of that to happen. Okay, so at this point, your students are over 2/3 of the way done with their first semester of college, which is really, really hard to believe. They've made it past their first round of midterms, hopefully, and are beginning to look ahead to finals and course registration for the spring semester, which I'm sure many of you have questions about and your students do as well. For most students, course registration is going to take place between November 12th and 13th, so just a week away for most of our first year students. If you haven't checked in with your student about their plans for the spring, we highly encourage you to do so. They've been equipped with a list of suggested first year courses, links to the academic catalog so they can see major and minor requirements, and even recordings from this past summer's registration webinar. So there's a lot of information out there, sometimes too much information, right? But we're giving them as much information as they need to make these decisions. So while I don't recommend that you plan courses for them, I do think it's a good idea to check in with them to make sure that they are thinking ahead and starting to make a plan for registration. We in first year advising ask all students to set up at least one individual advising appointment before registration, so please know that we will be checking in with them as well. We will work to make sure that they understand the course modalities for the spring, right? I know there's a lot of questions about courses being fully online or some that have some in-person component. So we'll work with them to make sure they know where to get that information through Eagle Service, making sure that they're completing AU core requirements and making progress towards their degree. So even though the spring semester has its share of unknowns, our goal is to help them make the best plan possible with the information that we have. There's a lot of information, and we'll definitely have time for questions at the end, but at this point, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Marianne Norman in the School of International Service.
Thank you, Kyle. So as Kyle mentioned, in the first year and with first year advisors, a lot of their job is to help students with navigating campus resources, and we do that as well in our unit-based advising. So while I represent the School of International Service as the director there, I am representing all of our schools today. So I'll be talking a little bit about unit-based advising today. So in the students' first year, they're really exploring just being in college for the first time. They're exploring that through their AUX courses. They're exploring different fields of interest that maybe they haven't been exposed to before, and they're getting exposed to that in their complex problems courses and their habits of mind courses, which they're taking in this first year. And of course, they're taking some major classes as well, and those university required classes like writing and math. So they're getting a lot of exploration this year and really figuring out what exactly are they interested in, and making sure that the intended major that they came to AU with is the field that they actually want to continue with. And I know Jimmy's going to talk about that a little bit more in just a bit. So as they transition then into unit-based advising, that's the piece that I really want to talk about. We start working with your first year students in their second semester. We have transition workshops that we do with the students. So they're really learning about their particular school that they'll be going into. And so we start working with them as soon as the add drop period basically is over for the spring semester. Most of the units across campus have peer advisors, and those are upperclassmen that work very closely with our sophomore students and our rising sophomores, so the first year students in their second semester. And they're helping them really with figuring out, okay, is this the right pathway for me? And then also helping them navigate, can I do all of the things that I want to do in the 4 years that I have here? And so they're helping them figure out, okay, I might want to do another minor or a major or study abroad. And the peer advisors are helping them that first touch of learning about all of these different fields. And so they're really figuring out, okay, what exactly am I interested in? And then they're making that decision. And most of our students that have come in with an intended major are officially declaring that major and that intention to continue on with that major within that second year, typically towards the end of the second year in the spring semester of second year. And that's really where they're making that firm commitment to, this is what I'm going to focus on. And then of course we have lots of undecided students as well. And if they haven't decided by the end of their first year, they'll be set up with an advisor in the College of Arts and Sciences who will help them navigate all of the different majors and figuring that out. Another piece that I want to talk about that does help students with figuring things out and exploring a little bit more is our Year 2 at AU program. And I can talk about it with what it was like in the past, but it will probably be a little bit different this year since we will be virtual doing it. But that typically falls in February, and it's a resource fair essentially where all of the different majors across campus are represented, all of the units, and then also different resources such as our academic support and wellness support. All of those pieces are within the Year 2 at AU, and it's really to help students just explore all of the things that AU has to offer as they're moving into their major. Jimmy, do you want to move to the next slide? Thank you. So we talked a little bit about major declaration already, so I'm going to skip that part on this slide, but of course we can answer more questions about major declaration later as well. In the student's second year is when they're really starting in on undergraduate research. So I'll talk about my school because it's the school I know the best, but I know that all of the schools have a research component. So within the School of International Service, students are taking a year-long sequence of research courses. In most schools, it's one research course. We do a full year, and students are really starting to explore the different ways to do research and then the different areas that they actually want to focus their studies on. And they're doing that in their second year, primarily across all of the schools. There's lots of opportunities at this point for students to actually start presenting. We have students that present every year at a national conference. It's virtual this year, but they will be presenting this year anyways at the virtual conference. And it's really just an opportunity for students to start exploring those things that they are most interested in. So that's another thing that will happen in their second year. And then of course, study abroad. so many of our students study abroad across AU. And so we want this to be a regular part of a student's curriculum. And of course, not every student wants to study abroad, but we want to make that available to any student who chooses to do so. The majority of students at AU are studying abroad in their junior year, but it's really during their sophomore year, that second year, where they're really thinking about, where do I want to go? What am I hoping to get out of my study abroad experience? And the advisors, the unit advisors and the peer advisors are there to help them figure out, how does this fit into my degree plan? And for most programs, a semester abroad does fit into their degree plans. And then internship exploration, which I will turn over to Gihan in just a second, but many of our students are doing internships, and typically our students are doing more substantive internships in their junior and senior year. When they're not studying abroad in their junior year, they're typically doing internships. But I will turn it over to Gihan so he can talk a little bit more about how those internships are related to their academics.
Thanks, Marianne. It's good to be with you all. Before I talk specifically about the internship exploration piece of this, let me just kind of give some high-level organizational stuff so that you're clear on how to help your student access the many available resources right in the space. So my office serves most of the schools at AU. The ones that have their own career office embedded are the law school, which isn't really relevant to this audience, and then the business school, which has its own team as another of the professional schools. With the School of International Service, my office and the School of International Service have a shared responsibility. So I have some advising that we do for first and second years out of my office, and then SIS itself has embedded within it their own team of advisors who career advisors who work with the upper class students as well as graduate students there. We all coordinate very much across these different offices to make sure that your students are getting the best service. But my point is this, is that depending on which of those schools your student attends, that's the first place that they should go to seek advising, right, on the career front. And all the career offices on our campus have a lot of availability, both for individual advisement, for group advisement. There's a whole series of events that are being done, as others have already mentioned, and similarly with the Career Center. In this time when we are teaching virtually and likely going to be much in that mode through the course of next semester, my office very quickly has transferred all of its resources. All of the activities that we were doing are now available online, right? And so we have virtual advising, with virtual drop-in appointments available. We have, on the other side of it, we also have been very successful, I think, in keeping a lot of our employer engagement activities. So whether it's panel presentations by employers, or whether it is a job fair that we're now hosting in a virtual environment, or even networking events. You might think it's hard to conduct a networking event virtually, and thankfully with the tools that are available now, we are able to make those connections still continue. So that's sort of a baseline, right? I also wanted to talk a little bit about sort of philosophically, how do we approach the work? We are in a mode here of wanting to teach all of our students. We are part of the educational mission of the school. My office and the other career offices fall under the provost side of the house. And so we view our mission as an educational one. So we're teaching students hopefully to have a lifelong ability to think and reflect and search appropriately for career-related things. Now, we don't just say go out and fish, right? We are teaching you to fish, and we are also, I like to think of it as, to extend the metaphor a little bit, that we're kind of, at first anyway, we're providing a bucket full of fish for you to fish in, right? So we're kind of not casting out into the open ocean right away. We're providing opportunities that allow your student to connect with employers who are likely to be receptive to them. And there's a variety of ways to do that. That's both for jobs and for internships. So on the internship side, to get to that point, there was a series of questions that you all had submitted in advance that related to this area, and several of them went around timing. When should my student be looking for an internship, if they were looking for an internship next semester or in the summer, let's say, coming on. So the first thing I want to say is that building on what my colleagues Kyle and Marianne have shared, we are in a very fortunate position at AU where there is a huge culture of experiential education. 90+% of our students at graduation of undergraduates have conducted at least one internship. And when we look at it, 85+% have typically had more than one internship over the course of their time at AU. As Kyle was describing, first-year students, if your student is a first year, really their first and most important, they have two, I think, big responsibilities, right? One is to settle in academically, and the other one is to acclimatize socially and to understand how university life works, right? And better to engage and get settled in. Those are the primary responsibilities. And I'll say to you as the director of the Career Center that I give you permission not to push your student who is a first-year student to go and find an internship. They are not behind. They are going to be, in fact, I think, better served by holding off until they're in their second year and on, right? This is the exact same advice that we gave pre-pandemic. So this is not to do with, that there's no remote internships or there's no in-person internships available right now. That is actually not true. Of course, the market is tighter. Of course, there are more challenges with getting these opportunities, and we saw a significant dip right after things closed down. We have seen that come back, right? Don't just only focus on the broader unemployment numbers, which are still quite difficult across the whole country. Here we're talking about sort of, I think, somewhat of a bifurcated economy where there's different opportunities available depending on the kind of educational opportunities and background that you're bringing and your level of experience, right, in the field. So for college students, there are perhaps fewer opportunities available, but there are still opportunities available. And so my advice is, given my limited time here, what I would say to you is the most important things that your student needs to be thinking about if they're not a first-year student and they're looking for an internship or for a job after graduation. I know there's many parents here also who probably have a senior. And so for those families, what I would say is individualize your students' questions and needs and help them to do that. If they haven't visited the AU Career Center's website, they should do so. There's a ton of really, really valuable resources on there, and the web page is easily found at american.edu/career center. Okay, so that's, again, I'll just say it out again, american.edu/career center. If you go on there, you'll see, and your student should see, and I encourage you also, again, in this mode of helping your student to learn how to do these things for themselves. It's not to do it all for them. You can help us and help your student by guiding them to the right places and giving them a nudge, but have them do it and do the work and help them to move that forward on their own. Another big resource that we have that is a platform used by many universities across the country and now actually across the world is a tool called Handshake. It is our database and connection tool that we have for all the career-related functions across the university. So job postings are handled through there, announcements of upcoming events are handled through there, and your student should already be familiar with Handshake, and if they're not, again, through the web page, online resources page, which is just right on the left of the page. It's one of the buttons that you can press on. Your student can find out how to access Handshake most effectively and to search on there for things. But I do encourage you to have the student, if they haven't already, to go ahead and make an appointment and meet with an advisor. If that seems a little intimidating as a first step, Also know that we have 5 undergraduate students that are our peer advisors. They're very well trained. We don't just throw them out there, and they're very available pretty much at any time during the semester. There's somebody on duty when the office is open during business hours, where somebody would be able to usually be able to do a drop-in, if you like, so just a walk-in, so to speak, in the virtual environment. And again, we've adapted so that we can take those into account. A couple of last thoughts before we allow others to move on to speak. I'm going to go back to that piece I was saying about it's not perhaps as bad as people might think in terms of the economy, but it is still tougher, right? We all know it's going to be a competitive economy, and especially for those students who are graduating and who are going to need a job in May or on from there. So what's my suggestion with that? I think there are 2 or 3 things, right? One is for your students to be very much on the ball more than they are. And I know that's easy to say and harder to do, particularly when there's so many other difficult things that they're dealing with on many fronts. But helping them to be organized, to manage their time, to be ahead of the curve rather than behind, to attend the many events and resources and opportunities that there are on campus to connect with employers, to register themselves for things like our Facebook account or to follow us on Instagram or so on and so on, which are all tools through which they will additionally get announcements, in addition to the many emails that we will send, which many of them will delete without opening. So those are all parts of our strategies to try to make sure that information gets out. And it's also on the student and you can help them with this, to be more what I call on the ball, right? A second point is for students to have more flexibility, right? And adaptability to circumstances. Pre-pandemic, we used to say, follow your bliss, really focus on what you're really, delighted about. And we still are saying that. We still want your students to follow those pathways that are of interest to them. But that's great as a plan A. And I think it's important in this time that you should also have a plan B and have a plan C, so that you're not, I always say to students when I'm doing a direct advising, it is better that you have, wouldn't you rather have your second choice opportunity than have no opportunity at all, right? And if you frame it that way and have both those searches, 2 or perhaps 3 plans going forward, that's going to be a useful way to go. And this is also true for internships, right? If somebody's looking for, is a 2nd or 3rd year student who is looking for an internship, to be mindful about it, to be planful about it. And again, they don't have to do these things by themselves or only with you, right? We have great resources available to help structure the students' thinking, to help them do self-exploration so that they can identify what they're really interested in, as their interests are likely to change over the course of their time here. And then finally, how to do those things, how to, it's basics of things like doing your resume and so on, but also how to identify the opportunities appropriately, how to interview effectively on Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. We have a ton of great resources on the webpage, which we have created since just in the last few months on job searching in a time of uncertainty. We have a YouTube channel that captures everything from how to do a Zoom interview effectively through how to use social media to network effectively, and so on and so on. So I will stop there and pass it on to Jimmy. I think you're next, right? Or is it back to Marianne?
Let's see, it might be me. It is me. Okay. So I wanted to take a bridge from where Marianne and Kyle and Guion have gotten us and just provide a little bit of context just from what I see in the data. Part of my role as assistant dean is I survey and research our students quite a bit, not only to follow up with them when I learn about things individually where they might need help and support with customized, personalized outreach and connection to resource, but so that we can learn as an institution about what our students are experiencing. So I wanted to share with you just a few things that I've learned in this past year, and particularly this last semester, about what's going on with our students. So one thing I want to describe is some common concerns that I'm seeing from our students. And what you'll see here is I have 5 different categories that I've laid out. What's interesting is that whether I ask first year students in year 1, YR1, or year 2 or beyond, the top 5 issues were the same. And what I have here is them ordered in terms of the first year students, challenges with technology. That's a new one for us. That usually does not show up, but given our modality, it's going to show up. What did that replace as the top issue? Homesickness. So homesickness used to be the top issue that our first year students were facing. That's completely off the list. I wonder why. And then replaced with challenges with technology. Struggling in courses is number 2. And so pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, online modality, in person, this notion of I'm struggling with courses has always been a dominant issue for our students. AU is a place where in some courses they'll feel like, hey, this is easier than what I did back where I came before. In other ones, it's a complete reorientation about how to think and how to learn and all that, and there's a learning curve there, and our students experience that. Time management issues is number 3. Worries about financing their education and or their kind of expenses around the educational experience. That's number 4. Interestingly, on that one, students' worries about tuition and fees and the cost of their education has been about the same. What's dropped, and I think it's some of the maybe unintended consequence, I don't hazard to say benefit because nothing in this moment feels beneficial in some ways, but some of those wraparound costs of where to live, buying stuff, getting around, all that kind of stuff, those concerns have actually come down. And so we've seen that uniquely this year. Some of that must be the comforts of being close to home for a lot of our students. And then this low evaluation of the social fit. Even when students are on campus around 7,000 other people, that sense of isolation still persists in a pre-online modality format. And sure enough, we saw that in a post-online situation as well, this low evaluation of social fit. Now, I mentioned that for our continuing students or returning students second year beyond, that it was these same issues in a different order. Well, here's the order. So top issue is still challenges with technology. How many say that? About 50% of students said that, hey, I experienced some challenges sometimes, whether it be my Wi-Fi, whether it be getting access to the right kind of resource online. What's interesting is that I offered this survey over a 2-week period. And at the start of the 2 weeks, these issues were more acute than the latter part. So in the span of 2 weeks, I think students were starting to kind of wrap their heads around how to kind of do as best as they can in this environment. Time management becomes a number 5 issue. Our returning students, and I did some qualitative work after the fact with this, I was wondering, why is that number 3 for you as a returning student? Because they knew what it was like before. And so their reference point was like, hey, before we went online, I had this really rich kind of vibrant social experience. And for our continuing students, you're getting is not only that kind of pure sense of like, I don't feel like I fit socially given our situation, but I think also a retrospective of like, this wasn't quite like what it was, last fall when I was here. And then financial worries are still there. And of course, those time management issues. Okay, so there's that. The next thing I want to look at is this changing of majors. From the first to the second year, how many students are changing their major? And what I find is that about 20% of our first year students will change their major into their second year. If you know anything about our students, if you know your student, you probably thought that they were pretty focused. They knew for sure they were going to AU for this particular reason and they weren't going to change. But the reality is about 1/5 of our students do. And in fact, when I look out towards graduation, over 40% of students will change their major. And so if your students are kind of examining their options, understanding their fit academically, know that that's completely normal. About 1/5 of it will do it from one year to the next. And then by the time our students graduate, 42% of them are graduating in something that wasn't their intended major when they walked through the door or logged on for the first time. And then going to the end of the process, the senior year, what am I seeing? This was something that we asked students not last spring, but the spring before that. We asked seniors, these questions, and these are the percentage of students that answered very often or often, the highest 2 marks on the question. All right, so the first question is, how often did you combine ideas from different courses when completing assignments? 80% of our seniors said that that's something they did often or very often. And I just wanted to show you this and a couple of other things to kind of show you the trajectory that the educational experience and academic experience at AU is going to take. What can you have to look forward to as a family or first year student that builds upon what they're doing here? When I compared that to colleagues at other private, research intensive universities, we were 10 percentage points higher on this question than our colleagues there. We also asked students, how often did you feel like you connected your learning to societal problems and issues? Almost 80%, 79% of our students, senior students, said that they were doing that. This was 17 percentage points higher than our colleagues at other private research intensive institutions. I think I have one more here. Yep. So how often were you including diverse perspectives in course discussions and assignments? 69%, almost 70% of students, seniors said that, and this was 14 points higher than our peer institutions. And so here in this one chart, hopefully you get a sense of some of what your students might be experiencing, how it relates to their peers, how it can feel very acute and unique to them, but also they're in good community of folks that are struggling, that are working hard through this moment. Some of that uncertainty about major change, how common is that? Pretty common. And some of what all this is for, where am I going? How am I going to feel as a senior? You see some of that as well. Okay. The next thing I want to go back to this thing about kind of normalize some of the struggle that I see with course struggling. It's by the 6-week classes. If I was an audience with you, I would ask you, show of hands, what do you think? So we'll pretend we did that. Let's say you were way off, and I'm giving you the answer now. 63% of new students said they were struggling at least one course. This year, I asked this question of new students and returning students, and I found that about 60% of returning students, sophomores and beyond, also said this. When I look at the proportion of students that were struggling in 2 or more courses, that percentage was about 35%. Anyone hear that? I think it's a phone call going on over there. And then so with that, I'm going to turn that off real quick. Be right back. Pay attention to this slide. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. Hi, everybody. So what that wasn't was a campaign call. Hey, we've improved. But anyway, so we had 60% of students, about 60% of students struggling at least one course. I told you about 35 to 40% of students are struggling in 2 courses or more. And then with that last point there is describing, hey, this is pretty steady to what we've seen before. And so some of the struggle might be different, right? It could be like I'm struggling, kind of thriving in this online space. But this experience of struggling in a course is pretty consistent from a pre-online modality to a post-online modality. Importantly, and we're in conversation today just talking about what were students doing when they were struggling. There's some positive news here and some not so positive news. Well, 84% in the course they were struggling the most said they were doing the coursework. Yes, okay, that's good. This is where it starts to get a little disappointing. Only 65% in that course they're struggling the most, so they were completing the readings. When I see this, I'm like, hey, we got some avenues to walk down. Do the coursework, complete the readings. Let's see how you feel after that. This year, about 20% were consulting with their professor. That's surprising to see because that would be my first step. I don't know if I know that now in my advanced age, or if I would have known that then, but that's where my mind goes. Find a person, let's have them help me, let's sort this figured out. But I can understand, a first-year student, a continuing student, that's not where they're going to go first. They're going to learn to do that, right? They're going to get these lessons and do that. But for them, what we find is sometimes avoidance, sometimes like trying to do it on my own, doubling down with a lot of like effort to stay up late, all this kind of stuff, and then missing some of the obvious, which is go find someone that can help you, either a professor or the second one, seeking academic support. Part of my profile as the assistant dean is I oversee our academic support function at the university. When I see this 20%, only 20% seek academic support, it crushes me, because like I would say one of the best resources on our campus is our academic coaching team. And the academic coaching team is available. Hopefully my colleagues can put their link in the chat. Karen and crew put that in there. But if you have a student that's struggling in a course, and I would say not from a content perspective, if the subject matter is hard for them, consult the professor, consult some tutoring, those kind of resources. You could find those resources online. But if they're like, I'm having trouble performing in this course, managing my time, reading effectively, and so forth, those academic skills components, that's when you want to seek academic coaching. And I think that, there is no better bang for your buck from a time perspective than spending some time with the academic coaching team. And so I definitely highly recommend that. Before we got on the call, I had a question that came to us that said, how are students doing just generally with online learning? And I went and checked out the data. In fact, I asked students a couple questions. I said, what do you like most about AU and what do you like least about AU this semester? And I was surprised to find that a third of our students said learning online and going to class online was what they liked the most. I did not expect to see that. I was surprised to see it, and I dug in a little bit more. Why are they saying that? I think some students were surprised to kind of learn that they preferred learning this way, that there is some benefits to doing that. And when I dug in a little bit deeper, what I was finding is that the asynchronous nature of some of their learning was helpful. They're setting their own pace, the convenience of it, being able to stay at home, all that kind of stuff was adding to their experience. I looked on the what do you like least about your experience, and what do you think came up? It was also learning online, right? And so it's a thing that gave and took away from them. A lot of them are saying things like, I get it, I understand we're doing it this way. I saw that prefix, that start of a sentence so many times in this question, comma, but this thing is bothering me, these kind of issues, right? And so it really said to me that, hey, students are making the most of their situation. They have understanding about it, but there are frustrations. And if you ask me about it, if you ask them about it, they'll tell you. Course load, kind of expectations for assignments. There's a mix of assignments that feels unusual to them, instead of kind of what they were thinking about, more of a pacing of like big assignments, big projects, that things are coming a little bit quicker. Maybe things are due every week. So these are choices that some of our faculty are making that I think are contributing to students, having some difficulty adjusting. We've heard that loud and clear. And remember, I said part of why I do this is to help your student, but the other part is to let the campus know what's going on. And so we've relayed that to our associate deans and deans, so they can relate to the faculty what we're hearing from students, and so know that we're doing that work. How fast can that change in a semester? I'm not sure, right? That's dependent on faculty members making that choice. How much can change for the spring? I think a lot. I think we'll learn a lot from about how did students thrive, what was useful, what was too much, what was not enough, and we'll make those big changes. And if you have a student that was here for the spring to the fall, they'll tell you, and I see it in the data, their experience last spring to this fall is much improved. And as we look forward to what's coming to this spring, I know it'll keep improving. So yeah, I just wanted to address that just briefly. Okay, so next, I think no, it's still me. I'm gonna just show you this stuff, but I'm also gonna make sure that we get you these links. But I wanna kind of highlight 5 areas of academic support that I think are really useful. Number 1 is academic coaching. That's the one that if you have a student that doesn't know where to start, this is for a non-emergency. I want to improve my academic skills, how I'm going about college, all that kind of stuff. Every student should spend a half an hour with these folks. They're really great. If your student's in a math or a stats or the quantitative class, our math stat lab is a great resource. We have so much availability. It's all available online. 100% of the service we offered in person, we also offer online, and so the resources are there. We have supplemental instruction. What that is an embedded tutor that's in our historically most challenging courses. And so we don't even rely on your students to go seek help if they're in a hard course. They're already in that room with them. SI leaders are in class at the same time, and every week they're holding a supplemental section where they're reviewing course material and so forth. And so the current semester schedule is available online. Like I said, you can jot it down now, but you're going to get this presentation, and we'll also get you the links as a follow-up to the webinar. And then Tutoring Lab, this is one-on-one tutoring that we offer in our challenging subjects like accounting, biology, chemistry, and economics, and so forth. That's there. And then I'll end with our writing center. And these are one-on-one sessions with writing consultants to just go about the business of getting good thoughts down on a screen and get going on that. On here, you see where these things are situated. Bender Library, the Don Myers building, all that kind of stuff. I'm so excited to get students back in those spaces. But I've been really, when we went online in the spring, in March, the speed in which the staff was able to get these services online, get them oriented, get them set up, get our staff trained and have them ready to see students was, I mean, within half a week, this was happening. By the time our students came back, we were ready to go and students were having good experiences. What this did for us was accelerate how we were already going. In academic support, we were offering a lot of online sessions already, and we thought we'd be here in 3 years' time that the bulk of our appointments be online, but we're building towards that. But we did that quickly, we're up and running, and I think your students will have a great experience. If they don't know where to start, I recommend academic coaching. Like I said, get started with them. My colleagues there are just outstanding. Okay, so there's that. All right, and so we'll end here, and Kyle, I'll let you take the lead on these first couple, okay, and then I'll come in with the rest here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jimmy. And I just wanted to make a quick note, actually, earlier when you were talking about things like academic coaching, academic support, I thought it might be helpful to maybe bring up the academic alert system that we have for families who might be interested in that. So I just thought it might be helpful for you all to know that, let's say, for example, your student is struggling in one of their courses, their faculty member might be concerned, they haven't turned in a few assignments or they did poorly on the midterm. Faculty can go in and submit what we call an academic alert and basically say, hi student, I've seen a couple of your grades, things aren't going well. I would love to make sure that you're connected to resources. And that generates an email that gets sent to their academic advisor. And as well, it also pings the academic coaches. So oftentimes what will happen is I, as an advisor, I'll get an email saying, oh, so-and-so's not doing so well in econ. I'll reach out and say, hey, make sure you're talking to your faculty member. Come talk to me. Did you know about econ tutoring? Let's chat. Let's make sure everything's okay, right? So there is this kind of network built in where when these things are happening, they're getting information from all sides about these resources. And so if it helps to know that that's happening, I think kind of a lot of times students are given almost, again, too many messages around all these resources, but they have them, and we are certainly pushing them that way as well. Yeah, okay, so how can you all help, right? What is your role in all of this? And I'm sure many of you have been negotiating this. If you have older students, you've been negotiating this for a while. If this is your first student in college, this might be a new relationship to manage and navigate, especially if they are home currently, right? I think one of the biggest things that comes up for us is encouraging students to build relationships with faculty, right? Jimmy mentioned that in his most recent kind of survey of students, very few students were reaching out to their faculty. And I think one point here is that this can happen proactively, right? Students don't need to only wait to reach out to their faculty members when things are going poorly. Oftentimes, it's maybe better to reach out when things are going well and to say, hey, I know you have office hours. This thing that you talked about in lecture was really interesting. I'd love to just drop by and chat more or learn more about your experience with X, Y, or Z. And that might feel a little tough for students at first. I hear sometimes it feels maybe like brown nosing a bit or feeling like they're trying to be teacher's pet, but really, really developing those relationships can be super helpful for students with faculty and with staff, right? Our advising staff, our academic support staff, we're here and we want to help them do that. The next thing that I think is important, and Jimmy mentioned this a bit as well, helping your student differentiate between what stress they're experiencing that might be related to just the situation that we're in, right? We are all experiencing a lot of just kind of general stress from the pandemic, from online learning in particular, for many of them being at home and kind of managing all that comes with that. While that stress is not normal, it's kind of unavoidable, right? And so I think helping students figure out what you're feeling is because of this that we're currently going through, And what of this is maybe normal academic discomfort that comes from just like a challenging class or adjusting to a new learning environment, right? Sometimes it can be really hard. And even for many of us professionally, it can be hard to figure out, is my job just hard right now, or is it hard because I'm online, right? Our students are experiencing the same thing. So helping them figure out where the stress is coming from might help you work with them to better figure out where to go and how to better manage the stress that they're experiencing, because we know that they are, and figuring out where it's coming from helps you figure out how to deal with it.
And I'll jump in on this one. It's about resources, just talk to you about resources, and a recommendation that we have for our parents and family members is dig in a little bit to the resource. So if after you leave here, you're like, okay, I want to look into that academic coaching. Instead of just kind of throwing that out as a recommendation, maybe dropping it in a text, maybe leaving it on the table, or the kitchen table, something like that. Do a little research, and I give some of the leads, find out like what is that next step that they need to take in order to do that. And so if you could drop the knowledge, oh, cool, academic coaching, you got to set up an appointment with You Can Book Me. Yeah, I know that word. I've looked into it. That kind of precision of recommendation can mean a lot to a student. Okay, they're really looking into it. They understand. They're not just saying something they heard. They actually wanted to connect me to a particular thing. And so think about how do you make a good referral to your student, right? Not just the general one that they can just kind of see and then they maybe just it's ephemeral, but it's direct. Hey, I noticed that you're struggling with this. Did you know that this existed? And the best way to get a hold of them is with that, right? So you're struggling in academics. I heard about academic coaching. Did you know that you could set up an appointment with them online on their You Can Book Me site? That is a message that'll stick, in my opinion. And so think about orienting some of that feedback and that outreach to your student from them. When I think about the untapped resources that we have just generally at the university, I always think students themselves are the untapped resource first. Then I think about our faculty. You know, how can I get our faculty to kind of be, to get this information and knowledge? And then I always think about parents and family next. Like how do we make sure that y'all have what you need in order to be good resources and for your students? And the last thing that we'll put here, and then we'll look to Karen, our colleague Karen, to come on and ask us some questions that have been coming in, is that we want you to listen to and empower your students to take active steps when they need help and support. And so it can be hard in this moment with everything against them to think about this notion of self-advocacy. And I'll let y'all think about how that'll work out for your student and your situation, but to not abandon that cause. That this college experience was supposed to be about them advocating for themselves, was supposed to be for them kind of striking out on their own. And you know, we could impress that and force that upon students a lot of times because of the nature of going somewhere to do that. Those lessons are still important, but how does it happen now? And so this is something that we would mention a year ago and today, this notion of helping your students to build those self-advocacy skills to thrive both right now in their time at AU, but and beyond. And so, you know, I'll pause there and then roll into our final part of our presentation.
Hi.
Hi, Karen.
From behind the curtain, here she comes. Great job, team. I think you covered an awful lot of the questions that had come in, but there's a couple that came through that I think will help us to clarify and remind. Kyle, I'm going to start with you. Can you please just kind of like refresh for us what happens for the first year students in that AUX class? Like probably right about now, they're really diving into how to prepare for course registration, right? So things like, how is that class helping them to be ready? How often should they be meeting with their first year advisor to plan the schedule? Because like this is different from when they registered for fall. And when do they actually start to register?
Yeah, great question. So I will preface this by saying each instructor does this a little bit differently, right? So I can speak to my approach and kind of how we generally approach this. There is a specific week in the AUX curriculum that's all about course registration. That happened for many of us around week 7 or week 8, so it's been a couple weeks ago. We do that intentionally about a month ahead of course registration. So in my class, we did a Kahoot where we did an online quiz to make sure that they knew what their requirements were, where to find everything. They get emails from us with all this information. And then the biggest piece is, yeah, meeting with us. So at least one time, but oftentimes students will meet with us early on to say, hey, I might want to explore a different major, or I'm not sure how this is going. So we'll talk through that, and then I'll say, all right, go do some research, come back to me in a week, put some courses on your planner, let's take a look. So some students are like, I can do this once and I'm set. Others have met with me 3 or 4 times going into registration. So it really depends on what they need, an advisor's capacity. And then certainly on the day of registration, we are all around for whatever students need. Again, it's going to happen for most students November 12th and 13th. It's based on the number of completed credits. So if your student is bringing in a high number of transfer, dual enrollment, or AP/IB credits, they might be registering a little bit sooner than that, or if they're in a specific 3-year program or have other accommodations. But for the most part, a week from today, Thursday and Friday of next week.
Excellent, thanks. Marianne, I'm going to go to you next because I think these questions apply to students across grade levels. So if you could speak a little bit about like how the pass-fail thing is working right now and what students should be thinking about, like the pros and cons, and kind of like why it is that we're not asking students to decide this until they already have seen their grades posted. So that's one question. The other one, if you can touch on, is just to explain how that waitlist process works, because I know there's a lot of anxiety from folks who think that they're not getting the schedule that they really want. And I think it may help for parents to know what to expect in that.
Sure, happy to talk about both of those. So for pass-fail for this semester and next semester is a little bit different. I know that AU went in one direction in the spring, and that has changed for this academic year. So it definitely is different, and it's important for the students to understand that difference. So the regular policy for pass-fail is that students can take up to 4 classes in their total time at AU for pass-fail. All of those courses are towards elective only. And so that policy still stands. Nothing has changed with that policy. Students can certainly still this semester take a class towards an elective that's pass-fail, no problem. What AU has done is added on an additional policy for this academic year. So nothing changes with that one, still stands. But in addition to that, students can now also take a class pass-fail, 1 class this semester and 1 class next semester. That's for pass-fail, that's going towards a major or university required course. And that's the different piece here. So students could potentially this semester take 2 courses for pass-fail. One could be that course that's an elective. They have no intention to use it for anything in their major. The other course can be towards a major or university required course. So it's really important for them to talk to their advisor about their choice, right? Because if a student has a B or a B+ in a class, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that they take the class pass-fail, right? And so one of the reasons that AU chose to let students decide afterwards is so that they can really look at their grades to see, what did I actually get in this class? And I think one of the things that we found last semester was that students were changing to pass-fail, but then ending up doing really well in their classes. And so we ended up having a lot of students after the fact saying, wait, I actually would have had an A in that class, but I changed it to pass-fail. Can I change it back now, right? And so in order to avoid that, the policy is now they can see their grades first and then make that decision to see, do I really want to change that grade? There's definitely some things to think about with changing it, especially if a student is interested in going to law school or med school and really thinking about what class am I taking pass-fail, and is that going to hurt me later on for getting into a med school or law school? And so having that conversation with their advisor to make sure it really truly is in their best interest to change that course to pass-fail. So definitely important. And hopefully that covers the pass-fail piece for you all. And then moving on to the wait list, of course, students are not always going to get their first choice, right? Because seniors are registering first, and that's intentional. We want to make sure that the seniors are getting exactly what they need to make sure that they can graduate. And so seniors are registering first, and then of course it moves on, and then first years are registering last. So they're not always getting their first choice, but for the most part, the courses that first year students are taking are the courses that other first-year students are taking. And so they're all registering for those first-year courses around the same time. But it doesn't mean that they're going to get their first choice topic or their first choice time, right? Not every student, most students don't want to take their classes at 8 a.m., but we have 8 a.m. classes. And so students do need to fill up those 8 a.m. classes. And so we recommend that students always get into a section of a class. Don't just waitlist, get into a section of a class, even if it's an 8 a.m. class, get into that 8 a.m. class and then waitlist. And how the waitlist works, it's really important that they first register and then waitlist. If they waitlist for their preferred section first and then say, okay, well, I need to have a backup to make sure that I'm in a class for the next semester and then register, the system thinks, oh, this student no longer needs to be on that waitlist. They have a class now. And so it'll kick them off of that waitlist. And so we always tell students, get into a class, make sure you have a full schedule. And then once you have that full schedule, go for it. Build out those waitlisted courses, and students can waitlist for up to 3 courses, but only 1 course within an actual area. So writing 100 for writing 101, which a lot of our students will be taking in the spring semester, they cannot waitlist for 3 different sections of writing 101, only 1 section of writing 101. But then if they're also taking world politics, they can register for that and then waitlist for a section of that. So that's how the waitlist works. They will get notification from the registrar around 6 or 7 a.m. on the day that they have a spot available to them, and they only have 24 hours to get into that class. So if they don't check their AU email for an entire day and they've missed that, they have lost their spot on the wait list. And when they add themselves back, they're at the bottom of the list now. And so it's really important that when students are on wait list that they are checking their AU email, which they should be doing every day anyways, but checking their AU email every day to make sure that they have not received an email from the registrar.
I think that does it. Well, folks, I wanted to be respectful of our time commitment for today. And so I thank all of our panelists for a phenomenal job. Families, I think you know the drill, but feel free to send your questions to us at auparent@american.edu if we didn't answer it for you today, or if you've got a follow-up question. Sometimes you've got specific student-specific questions. It's going to help when you send those emails to me with your student's AU ID number, and I will pass them back out to the panel so we can get you an accurate response. Folks, we're going to share our link to the recording of today's session with you just as soon as it's available. You'll get that automatically, and continue to watch for more future webinars from us. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye, thank you.